Well, call us AEW, because this week we're all about factions. While a villain acting alone or a few stray allies can be fantastic, there's nothing quite like a group of people with a common goal to push it over the top. Now, there are several homebrew factions that will be legendary in their own right, and depending on your setting and game of choice, you may be better served by a group like the Jedi, the Game of Thrones houses, the Riders of Rohan, the Undersiders, or D-Generation X. This list is about the Forgotten Realms setting, specifically 5th edition. However, they are transferable to nearly any fantasy setting and take very little work to adapt to other settings, like sci-fi or even modern. And hey, don't forget to join our faction by clicking that subscribe button and the bell. While you're at it, don't forget to chokeslam the like button. Okay, I'm done with the wrestling references, I promise. I am the Penitent with College of Lore, and this is the top 10 exciting factions to add to your next tabletop game. Honorable mention, the Guilds of Ravnica. Okay, so these just miss out on our list because they hold little relevance unless your game takes place in Ravnica, but if it does take place in Ravnica, they are like the thing. Still, if you're interested in running a game in Ravnica, or you have a Ravnica game coming up in 10 minutes you totally forgot about, here's a brief rundown. The Azorius are judgmental for a living, the Rakdos are a murder circus, the Gruul are barbarians, the faction, the Selesnya are hippies, the Orzhov keep pet ghosts, the Izzet have big sorcerer energy, the Golgari are gross and weird, the Boros are suspiciously Roman, the Simic cannot be trusted with anything biological, and the Dimir don't exist, and it's a shame what happens to anyone who says otherwise. Number 10, the Emerald Enclave. Big fans of all thing green, this guild. Almost exclusive to druids, they probably won't be one your players look to join unless you have a very specific campaign, but can be interesting to have players originate from. The druids and sparse rangers in this enclave are very much a force for nature more than anything else. They have, for the most part, stayed neutral in conflicts of good and evil unless the natural order of things is put at risk. The guild's dogma heavily stresses the importance of nature's preservation, restricting human expansion, and governing magic use to prevent major disaster. The Enclave tend to be major players in Faerun and are vaguely aligned with popular gods Eldith, Myliki, and Sylvanas. And while these gods are mostly good and neutral, it doesn't mean the Enclave has to be. From a morally just and upstanding body that seeks to preserve the natural balance of things, all the way to a murderous cult that has decided to cleanse humanoids from the material realm to protect it. A personal favorite way to run them is to have them a large and respected guild that most look to for governing on nature and magic, but when the chips are down, their higher-ups will not act to stop a world-threatening enemy. Whether out of fear or stubbornness is kind of up to you. This creates a late-game situation rife with internal conflict and mass defections, as well as an interesting moral quandary for any druids, rangers, or nature clerics in your group. Number 9, the Xanathar Guild. The Xanathar Guild, or Xanathar's Thieves Guild, probably won't affect the game much outside of Waterdeep, though they can be slid into any large homebrew city without rocking the boat too much. A Waterdeep criminal empire, they're about as close as D&D gets to the Mafia. They get their name from their leader, though it has become more of a title passed from one paranoid beholder to another. They are tied into the whims of their leader, typically dealing in shady and criminal operations such as blackmail, burglary, and slavery. They are going to present problems for your players, whether they fancy themselves daring adventurers or an underground gang of criminals that get in the way, unless of course they can be bought or coerced. Membership in this group requires the applicant to either murder or sell a close family member to be welcomed to their ranks. So I sort of hope your players don't decide to join the group? The only method of real advancement tends to come through quite literally stabbing your superior in the back too. So why are any of you here at this point? How is this at all a stable work environment for anyone involved? And look, as much as I like to leave options open for guilds to be run as either evil or good, I'm not quite enough of a ghoul to try to run slavers as justified. I'd have to be governing Florida for something like that. That being said, I don't want to say every single person in this guild is a monster. Especially if your party has made an enemy of Xanathar, it can be useful to have a few people either way too far in over their heads who want out, or people looking to eliminate the big beholder himself. They aren't really that nuanced, beyond being an evil, slave-trading mafia proxy. I do like to run them similarly to an entity like Coil's faction from Worm, to go with the reference that approximately 3 people watching will get. Basically, in an undercity full of evil and criminal gangs, these are the big guys with a hand and control of almost everything. Come to think of it, running a group of small-time thieves going up against the Xanathar Guild actually sounds like a really cool game. Number 8, churches. Okay, a very general entry, but fun fact, these things exist in real life too. Whether it be cultists to the likes of Bane, Asmodeus, or Lolth, a helpful allied group your players grow to love like temples to Lathander, Ilmater, or Mistra, or a mysterious entity with unclear allegiances beyond their gods like the Traveler or the Raven Queen, churches have potential to be as good of allies as they do adversaries, and sometimes both in the same game. It's rare you'll have a party of nothing but non-religious adventurers, so there's a good chance that at least one of your players will either have a positive or negative connection to at least one god in the Pantheon, or a skilled DM can get those players attached along the way. These are too versatile to ignore, even if just for a bit part. Have a drow in your party that has the audacity to not follow Lolth and or be male? Lolth's followers would like a word. Have a party member that sacrificed themselves for their friends. Maybe you should see about them waking up in a temple to Ilmater. The possibilities are really sort of endless, but it's a world with hundreds of gods and their existence proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Religion will likely play a part in most of your Faerun-based campaigns. There is no general rule on playing something so varied, but a few things I like to do are secretly evil churches to good gods, or well-meaning clerics to evil gods, and having most good and neutral-aligned gods as an ally faction, while evil gods are more standalone and spread out. Number 7. Bregan D'aerthe. The Bregan D'aerthe are a mostly, but not entirely, drow mercenary group that operates out of the Underdark, but can frequently be found in several places on the surface, including Waterdeep, led by a famous character from the D&D novelizations and lore in general, Jarlaxle Bienre. The group's leader alone produces several roleplay opportunities, but the group itself cannot be discounted. The first group on this list I could really see a player wanting to join. An alliance between the party and Jarlaxle could easily lead to several new plot threads. Morally grey, but not to be confused with good, the Militant Guild are sellswords available to the highest bidder. They could work for the best and the worst the world has to offer, depending entirely on who is willing to pay. They have a darker side, specifically the fact that few that cross them are ever heard from again, and should the party turn their backs on them, they may find exactly why. Especially fun to run with drits around with sexual tension if you're not a coward. As for how I run them, I like to play into the dark side, almost running them close to something like Negan's faction in The Walking Dead. They can be run well as villains with hearts of gold, but I actually love leaning into the darker aspect. Number 6, the Lord's Alliance. Despite sounding like a very racist Christian fellowship, the Lord's Alliance are one of the most respected and influential factions in the Forgotten Realms. Membership within the Lord's Alliance is a little hard to get. Most proper members are people with either political or financial power in major cities along the Sword Coast, but becoming an associate is actually quite easy for a group looking for adventure. Formed to oppose the Zhentarim, the Alliance are actually a really interesting way for your players to be introduced to the world of factions. The group have a habit of hiring on plucky young adventurers to deal with, even if indirectly, the Zhentarim. Personally, they're a fantastic way to bring a lost mind group together. Now, while the motives of the group are noble, their group leadership, being made up of the rich and powerful, does not have to be. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and a very greedy and ambitious nobleman can be an excellent twist villain. Or you could go much bigger and make them inherently corrupt from the top down. Me personally, love to use them as a more approachable and public alternative to the Harpers. There are a few corrupt higher-ups, but statistically you'd think there'd have to be. But I love to use them as a more personal introduction to bigger and more world-ending threats, though my parties tend to get less involved with them and more involved with the Harpers as time goes on. Number 5, the Red Wizards of Thay. A powerful order of necromantic wizards from the country of Thay, you get exactly one guess as to where they fall as far as alignment. Not just a powerful order, but in fact the ruling political body of Thay as a whole. They're all but essential for a Thay campaign, but sects of the group can easily exist all over the Forgotten Realms. Taken at either major point in their history, the one where they were run by a council of wizards, or the one where they were run by noted approachable fellow Zhentarim, the Red Wizards are extremely imposing as either big bads or arch villains, and seeing as they're almost entirely wizards, they're easy to plan combat for. The structure is a bit dragged down by the constant infighting and branches off of the group. They function similarly to the Sith in regards to the respect for authority, so they need a presence like Tam to be at their best. Not exactly ideal for the party to join. For one, they're expressly evil and evil campaigns are usually bad. Also, their group is almost exclusively wizard, but if what interests your group is an all-evil, all-wizard campaign, at least you can join this one without killing your mom. They are, like the Xanathar guild before them, expressly evil. Slavery, murder, and politics are all kind of inherent in their deal, and a good version of them would just be a good wizard's council? Still, the party working with a turncoat could be a really interesting hook. Personally, I love them as B-villains, creating several arcs and problems for the players without being the big deal, but you can make them that if you want to. Number 4, the Order of the Gauntlet. The moral authority of the realm, based on the idea that all their members are upstanding and virtuous, often holy, warriors. The Order of the Gauntlet are one part church, one part police, and one part military, and I feel that you and your players' view on those things might directly impact your experience with them. They seek to drive out all evil that cannot be ignored or otherwise dealt with. It's always fun to have these guys show up at the dire hour and either fix things, break them, or do a bit of both. If the party are more into the true good paragons of justice style of play, Joining with the Order can be a blast, whether or not corruption runs deep within your version of the organization. Speaking of corruption, however, this group can follow orders for the sake of the law from unjust generals, kings, and gods, as well as defining evil as simply being a drow, or worshipping the wrong guy. But they can also be a true driving force for good in a world that is sinking slower into darkness. I love to run them with heavy inspiration from Fallout's Brotherhood of Steel. Big, powerful guys with crazy advanced technology and magic who show up, neutralize the threat, and move on to the next one. That includes, in my world, having little concern for collateral damage or whether the ends justify the means. Number 3, the Companions of the Hall. Okay, so this one is kind of controversial. Not a proper faction like most on this list. They have no branches in various cities, no large-scale army, and no official process for joining. What they are, however, is the most legendary adventuring party in the history of the world if you choose to run them that way. Led by Bregan D'aerthe and featuring a revolving door of a roster, the Companions are the premier adventuring party in the Forgotten Realms, and their arrival means something serious is about to go down. They can be absolutely iconic if your group knows this part of D&D lore, but arguably better if they don't. The first group, kind of low-key hard to portray as evil. I have seen a variant on Evil Companions where Drizzt has since been ousted, usually by Jarlaxle. Contrast that, portraying them as D&D's answer to the Avengers is an amazing way to establish narrative stakes, either establishing your party as getting famous by getting the opportunity to work with them, or as establishing the new threat means business by them bodying the companion. Letting the party join them is generally hard to advise, seeing as Drizzt can really feel like a bad self-insert DMPC in the wrong hands, but a clever DM could probably pull it off. Just in counterbalancing, it's infinitely more taxing. Nothing for me, though, will ever beat portraying them as big, damn heroes, world-renowned and leaders in the adventuring field, only to someday let something topple them, leaving your party to save the day. Number 2, the Harpers. The Harpers, or Those Who Harp, which is an objectively dumb name, are one side of D&D's most legendary faction war. If the Companions are the Avengers, the Harpers are S.H.I.E.L.D. Secretive, telling adventurers only what they need to know, but ultimately after the protection and preservation of the world and all history and beauty in it. They oppose evil in all its forms, but understand balance and the reason evil exists. These guys can function as both a source of mystery and trusted allies, even superior officers to the main party. Similar to the Order of the Gauntlet and Lord's Alliance in morals more than methods. A good aligned party, or anyone already working for one of the aforementioned guilds, will likely find themselves drawn in or invited up to the Harpers. Typically a good group, there is always a chance someone amongst them is greedy for the powerful objects the Harpers possess, or a spy from a group like the Red Wizards or Zhentarim has slipped past and worked their way up the ranks. Still, played straight is on the side of good, though usually at least gray morally. They can be heroes or twist villains with equal effect. In my home game, the Harpers are the capital G good guys. They stand as the last and best guard against the evils of the world and those that would see it end. Almost the best faction available to you. Almost. Number 1, the Zhentarim. The Illuminati of the world of Dungeons & Dragons, the Zhentarim are the darkest of shadow organizations, spoken of in quieter whispers than the likes of the Harpers or House Demir. If the Zhentarim had their way, they would control everything, with not a soul knowing the names or faces of their agents. And everything that refused their rule, it would simply cease. Their origins are that of a more front-facing cult heavily tied to Cyric and Bane. The group has slowly sunk more into the shadows while maintaining some mercenary organizations under various names. Still, their hands are in nearly every pot of illicit activity, and if the party runs for or counter to any of these, they're likely to run into at least someone with ties to the Zhentarim. They are more than willing and able to hire on a group of adventurers they find useful. Whether their goals align or not is hardly relevant, and hey, they may be the worst evil in the realm, but you don't have to sell your cousin to join them. That being said, they will likely turn on the party at whatever opportunity is best for their leaders. Could you run them as good? Maybe, if the world is messed up enough, but doubtful. That being said, you could easily make it so that every other faction is, to some degree, being controlled by the Zhentarim, which creates exactly the type of paranoia that will make your players permanently incapable of trusting any of your NPCs. And I think most of the team here, are virtually incapable of running a Forgotten Realms campaign if the Zhentarim aren't involved in some way, shape, or form. They are an excellent big bad faction that runs deep enough to keep your players chasing the tail of the snake all the way up. And that's our list. Did we forget your favorite faction? Tell us about it in the comments. And tell us your own stories while you're there about factions you've added to your home games. Thank you for watching this video from College of Lore. Remember to like this video, subscribe to join the party, and have a fantastic adventure.